Thank you for joining me today. I'm very excited to have you. If you will introduce yourself and your role at your company, and we'll go from there.
So my name is Bradd Konert, and I'm the president of Gamma Tech Services.
And what do you all do at Gamma Tech?
Gamma Tech, we're actually a little bit different. So we provide tech services in two different areas, but we are a managed services provider, managed security services provider, and we also provide audio video services and low voltage cabling.
How many employees do you have at your company?
We have 35 employees.
Wow, that's great. And where are you all located, by the way?
We're in Southwest Florida, Naples, Florida.
Great. Awesome. How did you initially come to find JumpCloud and decide that you were going to use it both internally and then for clients?
Yeah, so I think JumpCloud, I don't remember the exact thing that exposed us to it, but I can tell you what we were looking for is that we were looking for a solution that could support cross-platform as we were running into more customers that were using a variety of different platforms, mostly Mac. We wanted to not just be committed to the Windows environment and Microsoft environment and to have some flexibility there. And JumpCloud afforded us that.
Great. Internally, are you using like all the different platforms, including
We
Mac
are,
and
yeah.
Linux?
So we are. So I'm personally a Mac user, which is, I think my previous self would probably go and smack my future self because I hated Macs. But I am a Mac user today. And we have a couple of Macs that we use on our marketing and that side. But generally, we're a Microsoft shop. But yeah, so we do use cross-platform here within the office.
Okay. And how do you use JumpCloud internally for your team?
So we're still in the process of rolling it out fully, but we are using JumpCloud right now for single sign-on. We're using it for mostly for employee startup and employee turnover, employee startup and employees exiting. Makes it very convenient in that way. We're also using it. We have decommissioned our server, and so we're using it as our domain controller of sorts to help manage user accounts on the local machines. We have some SSO integration, although unfortunately, a lot of our applications that we use do not support SSO. So with that, we were excited when JumpCloud launched the password manager because that really allows us to make that a little bit more of a comprehensive solution where it can be all in one. For the things that don't support SSO, we still have that single login information that the technician or employee can remember. And we're also using it for some of the zero trust, definitely for when it comes to the security side. That was the main thing that attracted us to it, is giving us the convenience of the security, as I mentioned, with turnover, but we have some additional things in place when it comes to access for our Microsoft in particular. We have that integrated with SSL, and we have that set up with what I call tri-factor authentication. I know it's just MFA at the end of the day, but we have Microsoft's two-factor, we have JumpCloud's two-factor, we have our own, and then you could even say that we have a fourth factor in that we've enabled the policy of if it's not a JumpCloud managed device and it's not within our network, then we don't allow it to connect as well. So there's lots of security there. When we're talking with customers, we like to brag. I'll tell people, hey, I could tell you my username, I can tell you my password, I could even give you an MFA code, but you're still not going to be able to get into my email. That's pretty powerful when we have that security through JumpCloud. So
I'm curious about how you came about doing two very different types of services with your company.
yeah, that's a great question. So I started the company when I was 16, just driving around fixing people's computers. Here in Naples, Florida, it's a very old demographic. It's a retirement community, and so it's changing, but historically, that's how it's always been. And we know that I always say that technology is like a language, right? So if you learn it later in life, it becomes more challenging. And so a lot of the older demographics struggled with technology. So we were just fitting in, trying to help them with how to use their computers. Yes, it was computer repair as well. And then as that started to grow and change, we started to do more commercial work. And that's when I started to grow just beyond myself. And around the same time, just a couple of years after that, we started to see that we, especially on the small business side, needed to run cabling, and there was need for conference room technologies and that type of thing. And we were referring that work. But then the great financial crisis happened, and it really had a big impact here in Southwest Florida. And so the company I was referring that work to went out of business. And long story short, I either had to take that business on myself or try to find somewhere else to refer it to. and I chose the former, and the rest is history. So that was 10 years ago, and we'll be celebrating 20 years as a company here in May. So,
Wow, that's great.
yeah.
So when did you add the security piece on?
So we started doing security and really focusing on that during COVID. I like to tell the story of prior to COVID, we would have about 2 people a year that would come to us with some type of ransomware or some type of cyber event, right? That would be on just a virus that would impact their business. And after COVID or during COVID, we started to see that go up to 2 a month. And as these customers were coming to us, they would be looking for alternatives to their current IT provider, but we found that they already had an antivirus in place, they already had a firewall in place, and they were already doing the things that we recommended to our customers. And so it started to make us question, can we take these customers on with integrity and give them peace of mind that, hey, we're going to do something different for you? And we really couldn't answer that question with yes. So it caused us to really look out and try to see what is out there that we can offer to our customers that would give them improved cybersecurity. And that was a very exciting summer. We watched about 100 different software demos. We spent the entire COVID season, after we got through the craziness of getting everyone remote, spent the entire COVID season just watching software demo after software demo. And from that, JumpCloud was definitely a part of that we discovered. And we were able to build our cyber stack. We're still building that, obviously, and starting to make the transition to making that our priority for our customers. And that's worked out well for us. I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve in that way. It seems like it's just catching on that most MSPs are starting to get that in order to stay competitive and really stay in this world, you need to be a cyber expert. But there's still quite a few that still haven't gotten that. And it's worked out well for us in that we've been able to establish for ourselves a foothold here and establish ourselves as credible cyber analysts and cyber protectors for our customers. So.
Cool. Do you do any tabletop exercises or anything like that with your customers, or is that kind of a little bit out of their league? Like teaching them what to do to respond to an incident, or kind of prepare them for, hey, you need to have a plan, and then you need to practice your plan to make sure it's actually going to work.
So we're saying like incident response, is that
Yeah,
the
kind
question?
of, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Trying
sometimes
to-
like having an incident response plan or business continuity plan, and then walking
yeah.
them through actually planning an incident, going through it and seeing if it works. Like, here, we're going to sit down, we're going to do a mock incident to put you through the paces to see if your plan actually works, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So we have, I'll say that that's something that ironically, we just had a pretty extensive meeting about last week, going through in more detail of how we can do that better. If I'm being transparent with you, I don't think that we do that very well right now. What we have found is we've tried to do that. What we have had difficulty getting is buy-in from the company as they're busy and just trying to go through things. We're trying to get them to put that time in with us. So we have more success, and this is true of anything, right? Especially in the cyber world. We have more success with those that have been affected by it and understand that this is a real threat. But those that haven't, we have difficulty getting buy-in from them and putting the time in with us. So we were actually just strategizing about that last week, trying to figure out how can we get more buy-in, how can we lay this out as a part of our QBRs so that it becomes, a part of the process that we're doing with the customer.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit back to the main questions. Could you tell me a little bit about a typical client, or in general, what, besides what we just talked about, what other kinds of problems are you coming in to solve for your clients?
Yeah. So I know it's repetitive, but I think that, again, our main focus right now is going to be on the cyber side of things. Yes, trying to improve efficiencies in the company, but as things have moved to the cloud and that's become easier for companies to do, I honestly think that in a positive way, it can be a negative for our industry, but I think in a positive way, it's become very easy to set up a lot of these things. Things that used to take an IT background in and would take hours and hours to set up can now be done with a click of a button, right? Just through a registration page. So that's a positive thing, but the cybersecurity side of things and what needs to be done there isn't so intuitive. And so a lot of times what we're doing is educating our customers, making them aware of the risks that they do have. I'm not trying to scare them anyway, but just legitimately making them aware of the risks that they have and then helping them to patch those risks. And a lot of that's training and getting buy-in from our customers to work together. We like to tell them, hey, you can pay us all the money in the world, but we can't. I equate it to this. We sell physical security, meaning that we sell security systems. So if a resident or a business is looking for us to install a security system in their home, we can do that for them. And I can install the latest state-of-the-art security system that has all the best sensors. But if my customer never arms the system, every time they leave the home, it's completely worthless. And so cybersecurity is the same exact way. It requires buy-in from both us and from the customer themselves. They have to participate with us. So we'll supply them with the tools so that they can be successful, but ultimately they're the ones that need to arm the system, so to speak, and disarm the system and use it properly.
Yeah, that's great. I guess so. Your business is, you're still doing a lot of IT work for people, but it's shifting into more of that security piece too.
Yes, correct. So if we look at the IT, I still classify, again, just because of how Gamatech is split up, I still classify the company as the audio video side and the IT side. And underneath the IT side is still cybersecurity. But you're right, in a more traditional sense, I would say that if we're looking at IT specifically and we define IT as traditional IT and not cybersecurity, it's probably about 60% of what our customers are looking for is traditional IT services, and about 40% is cybersecurity. And comparatively, again, just this is in a 4-year transition, I would say that was maybe 5% cybersecurity and 95% just 4 years ago. That's a pretty drastic change. And I think that we'll see that be a majority probably by the end of this year, quite honestly.
Wow, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool though to manage to stay relevant and keep adjusting, because I know some companies just they stay in their lane and they don't adjust. So I think that's great that y'all are moving with the way the winds are blowing.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of full suite JumpCloud deployments, or are you finding that you're doing more custom work for people?
Yeah. So I think that we want to, but I think the same thing of how I described how Gamatech is still in the rollout of JumpCloud is such a large, you said full suite. I think that's a good word for it. It is such a large product. There's so many facets to it. So we sell it as one package. When we initially started selling it, we were selling it in, broken out into different packages, but now we sell it as one package. So they get the full access to the full suite. But the reality is we find that even with our best intentions, it takes about a year for us to roll that out in a more comprehensive, still, I don't think it's still full, but to get, let's call it 80% of JumpCloud still takes us about a year to get that rolled out properly. And I think some of that could be improved on our side. I think a lot of that is our fault, but I think also some of it's the fault of JumpCloud and that it's just such a large suite. There's a lot to do there.
Mhm. Are you finding that companies are a little resistant to change, or it's a lot for them to take on if they're just kind of doing things piecemeal or things like that? Or maybe they don't even have any practices in place. So it's like part of it's just change management.
It is. Yes, it's both those things. Businesses as a whole are slow to want to make changes, right? It's not, especially the larger businesses, which is the target market, right? It becomes more difficult to make those changes. They're bigger ships to move, so to speak. But yes, you're dealing with that. And you're also dealing with trying to get, again, to use the analogy of the security system, to get buy-in of the, hey, I always left my home and I never had to arm the security system. I used to just walk in and walk out if I forgot my shoes, and now I have to disarm it, and I really don't like this. And trying to make them understand, hey, this is essential. And I understand that with all security, even though JumpCloud makes it far less inconvenient, it still adds a level of inconvenience that we don't want to admit happens when we add security to anybody's stack. So
Yeah. Or they all shared the same code and
correct,
you're giving individual codes and like, but we all shared it. It's not
correct,
that big of a deal.
correct, correct. A lot of that,
Yeah.
absolutely. Password managers, getting them to employ that when they've used, we just had 3 passwords and I remembered them, and it's okay, we got to stop doing that. We got to go through the process of getting all these passwords changed and setting them up in the password manager. It takes time and takes just, it's in a way it's sales, right? You have to convince them, you got to get their buy-in, you got to sell them on the idea of, even though they've already bought the product, sell them on the idea of actually using the product and making sure that they understand the benefit of it.
Yeah. There's a difference between installation and implementation, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How big are what's the average size of the clients that you're putting in these packages for?
Yeah. So Southwest Florida Naples is definitely a small business focused. We're just starting to see now more larger businesses. But quite honestly, it's a great fit because most of our customers are not big enough to have their own internal IT departments, although we do have some that do, and we work well with that. And so they're like this perfect size there. Naples feeds that. So it works out well for us. But to answer your question, most of our businesses are anywhere from like 10 to 50 employees. I know that's a big spread. I guess if you were to average them, it's probably about 25 employees. But anything over 5 employees is our minimum. We don't take on companies with less than 5 employees, which is I have found across the market is a pretty low minimum. A lot of small businesses, MSPs will only take on 15 or 10 or even higher numbers. So we will take on the smaller businesses. We find that we can still work well with them, but most of our companies are going to be, let's call it 20, 25 as an average size.
Gotcha. Okay. Are you finding that are a lot of these companies like in office, or are any of them hybrid or remote? Or are you finding some of them transitioning between that?
Yeah, so we're seeing some transition, but not as much. We saw a little bit of that during COVID, or I should say a lot of that during COVID, and that's regressing now. So most of our customers are in office. A few of them have satellite locations or remote sales staff and that type of thing, but they're primarily a office-based business.
Let's see, what else? Are there some interesting ways that you've implemented JumpCloud with clients? That might be an interesting story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think probably the most fun or interesting story would be for a client that we were doing a pen test for. They had hired us to look at their systems and see what was vulnerable, right? They were specifically worried about their payroll system, which was connected via us using Okta. And so we actually used a pen test method that was the same attack that Twilio and Okta experienced. It was SMS attack, and so we used the same strategy as a part of our pen test with them, and we were successful in getting into a few of their different accounts via Okta. And then once we had access to that, we had access to whatever was there with Okta. And so this is always one of the common concerns that we have when people are talking about SSO. If they haven't heard of SSO before, they can think of SSO as being a less secure solution, right? Because once you have the keys to the whole kingdom, so to speak, right? And that's what we really like about JumpCloud, and what we were able to talk to them about with JumpCloud is that, hey, with JumpCloud, we can add additional layers of protection on there and really lock that down with things that we would never be able to do without an SSO, right? Without JumpCloud acting as that SSO. For that customer in particular, we were able to introduce hardware keys. That was the first thing that they were looking for, but they already had that ability with Okta. So they wanted to do something a little bit more advanced that wasn't as inconvenient as hardware keys. And again, that's where we were able to bring them into the idea of setting up rules with JumpCloud managed devices. So we put in JumpCloud managed devices for them and said, hey, we can make it so that even if someone has access to this and has access to the SSO, if it's not a JumpCloud managed device, it's not going to be able to get on to the SSO and be able to access these different sources. So they love that because it allowed them to get away from the initial response, which was the hardware keys. Although that worked, it wasn't a good solution for them because they had over 250 employees. And a lot of those employees were field staff. So it just didn't make sense to try to manage hardware keys. So this gave them an alternative that still gave them additional protection, additional layer of protection without the inconvenience of the hardware keys. So I'd say it's probably the most fun story of how JumpCloud really stepped up and was able to solve the problem.
That's great. Well, thank you. Now, one question about that is we actually integrate with Okta. So did they wind up keeping Okta and just using JumpCloud to integrate, or did this just replace it altogether?
We didn't, yeah, we replaced Okta altogether in that situation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Are there any stories around you or your clients where, let's say, they can actually talk about saving time in onboarding or user management or actual cost savings?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's probably our biggest sales pitch with JumpCloud is talking about employee turnover. And I would say that if you look at our tickets and what we're doing as a company, most of what we're doing is employee onboarding and employee offboarding. And I would say in the world of cybersecurity, if you look at most of the most recent breaches and how they've happened, I would say a majority of those end up happening not from some type of patch that wasn't done or some type of complex vulnerability. It was something as simple as that user that was set up was never offboarded properly and their account is still there. And so JumpCloud makes that so much easier to manage. And so that's a huge sales pitch for us as we're talking with the customer to be able to talk about cost savings is, hey, once we get this set up properly, we can onboard an employee and a click of a button, and we can offboard an employee with a click of a button. So it really takes away a lot of that burden when we get that notice from one of our customers that, hey, they're going to be terminating one of their employees and they want to make sure that access is removed. Now we're not having to go into all these different platforms to do that. With one click of a button, we can offboard that employee, have the confidence that they're removed from a VPN if they have VPN, they're removed from all the SSO applications, they're locked out of their computer. It really gives them the Wi-Fi connection, right? Whatever we have integrated at that point, with one click, we can remove them from all those resources. It's incredibly powerful and incredibly time saving.